There's a man standing across the road from me, and he has not moved in 40 minutes. Not a twitch, not a blink that you'd notice. The pigeons walk right up to his boots like he's a lamp post, and he lets them. People hold their phones up an inch from his face and pull silly faces, and he stares straight through them like they're made of glass. You'd swear, if you didn't know better, that there was no one home behind those eyes. But there is. That's the thing nobody tells you. There's a whole person in there. A man with a mum and a sore knee and a girl he hasn't texted back and a song stuck in his head. And on the morning I want to tell you about, that man did something I have thought about almost every day since. So let me take you back. Let me take you to that street before any of it happened, when the worst thing in the world was the drizzle. His name was Daniel. Daniel Hartley, 23 years old, Coldstream Guards, though I didn't learn his name until much later. To me that morning he was just the guardsman on the left, the tall one, the one closest to the corner where the railings turned and the crowd thinned out a little near the park. It was a gray spring morning in London, the kind that can't make its mind up. The sky sat low and flat like a wet ceiling. There'd been a bit of rain overnight, and the pavement still had that dark shine to it, and the air smelled the way London smells after rain, wet stone, diesel, coffee from somewhere, and underneath all of it the green, slightly muddy smell of the park breathing out across the road. I was there because I was early. I'm always early. I had a meeting near Hyde Park Corner that wasn't until 11, and I'd given myself far too much time the way you do when you don't trust the trains. And so there I was at 20 to 10 with a paper cup going cold in my hand and nowhere to be. There was a small ceremony being set up that day. Wreaths, I think. A memorial thing. There were extra barriers along part of the route and a few rows of those metal crowd railings, and the guardsmen had been posted out along the pavement in a way you don't usually see. Two of them stood near the corner where I was, on either side of an arch of stone, still as posts, bearskins on, chin straps biting into the soft part under their lips. And the tourists loved it. Of course they did. There must have been 30, 40 people clustered round in a loose horseshoe, all of them with their phones up. A school group in matching yellow caps. A couple of older Americans in those enormous white trainers. A young dad with a little girl on his shoulders. A man filming a video of himself talking to the camera, gesturing back at the guards like he'd discovered them. The usual. And every single one of them was waiting for the same thing. They were waiting for him to move. That's the game, isn't it? You stand there and you wait, and some part of you wants to see the statue crack. You want him to laugh or scratch his nose or shout at someone. You want proof that he's real. People would lean in. People would say daft things. Smile, mate. Go on, give us a wink. A lad in a hoodie did a little dance right in front of Daniel, 6 inches from his face, arms going like a windmill, and his mates howled. And Daniel just looked through him at the building across the road like the lad wasn't even born yet. Now here's what I didn't understand then, and what I understand now. He wasn't ignoring the lad, he'd left. That's the only way I can describe it. He had taken himself somewhere else. His body was on that pavement in that ridiculous heavy coat, with the rain starting up again in a fine mist. But Daniel, the actual Daniel, the bit of him that thinks and feels and gets bored, was a long, long way away. I know this because months later I sat across a table from him and asked him. And he told me, in that flat, careful way some soldiers have, where they're not bragging, they're just telling you the truth and watching to see if you can handle it. He said the trick of it is that you have to make a deal with your own body. You can't fight the body. You learn that fast. If you fight it, you lose. The first weeks, he said, were agony, not the dramatic kind, the slow kind, the kind where your foot goes to sleep and then wakes up and the waking up is worse than the sleeping, the kind where an itch starts on the side of your nose and grows until it is the only thing in the entire universe, until you could weep, until you would genuinely trade a month's wages just to lift one finger and scratch it. And you can't. You mustn't. Because the whole point of you, the entire job, is that you do not move. So you stop fighting, you make the deal. The deal is this. You say to the body, all right, you stay here, you hold the line, you feel the rain and the ache and the itch, and you deal with all of that, and the me of me, I'm going to step out for a bit. I'll be back. But I can't stay in here with you while you suffer or I'll crack, so I'm going to go somewhere nicer and you just keep the shape. And then he leaves. He told me where he goes. He goes to his nan's kitchen. His nan had a little terraced house up north, and a kitchen that was always too warm, and a radio on the windowsill that only really got one station clearly. And when Daniel needs to leave his body on a wet London pavement, that's where he goes. He builds the whole room, not in a fuzzy way, in detail. The yellow lino with the worn patch by the cooker, the smell of toast under the grill because she always did toast under the grill, never a toaster said toasters made it taste of nothing. The radio playing something old, the condensation on the window, the fat ginger cat, Marmalade, asleep on the chair he wasn't allowed to sit on. His nan's hands, the rings loose on her fingers now, buttering the toast right to the edges because she couldn't bear a dry corner. He builds it brick by brick, smell by smell, and he stands in it. And the pavement and the rain and the lad doing the windmill dance all go quiet and far away, like a telly in another room. And his body keeps the shape. That's what we were all looking at. 40 people with their phones up trying to make a statue crack. And the statue was empty in the gentlest way. He was having a cup of tea with his nan. I find that beautiful, honestly. I've thought about it a lot. We spend so much energy, all of us, trying to be present, trying to be here now. And here was this lad who'd been trained to do the exact opposite, to leave so completely that you could set off a firework by his ear and he wouldn't flinch. And he'd learned it not to escape life, but to do his job, to hold a shape, to mean something, while the soft animal of his body got on with the business of suffering quietly. Anyway, that was the morning. That was the calm of it. I want you to really feel how ordinary it was because of what came next. The drizzle thickened, and a few of the tourists drifted off to find cover. The school group got marched away by a harassed-looking teacher counting heads. The dad with the little girl set her down, and she immediately ran to the railing and pressed her face against it to look at Daniel. And I saw this, I swear I saw this, he flicked his eyes down to her for half a second. Just a flick. Then back up to the building. She didn't see it, but I did. And I remember thinking, oh, there you are. There's the man inside. About then the changing happened, or the relief, whatever the right word is. There was a bit of business with boots and a sergeant's voice barking something I couldn't make out, and the guardsmen did that slow, exact marching they do, like men walking underwater, and shifted positions. Daniel ended up still on the left, still near the corner, still nearest the park. The new arrangement put him maybe a little further forward, closer to where the railing met the open mouth of the crossing. I checked the time, 5 to 10. My meeting was ages off. I thought about leaving to find somewhere warm. I didn't leave. I want you to know that I nearly left, that the whole thing turns on me being a coward about a cold cup of coffee, on me thinking, give it another 10 minutes, the rain might stop. If I'd gone, I'd have read about it in the paper like everyone else. Instead I stayed and I saw it, and now I can't unsee it, and I suppose that's why I'm telling you. The first thing that was wrong, I didn't even clock as wrong. It was the birds. There's a thing pigeons do and starlings when something spooks them. They go up all at once, the whole lot in a single clattering rush like a sheet being snapped. And about 10 past 10 that happened. Every bird on that stretch of road and in the trees along the park edge went up together, a gray explosion of wings wheeling and turning. And the sound of it, that soft thunder of hundreds of wings, made a few people look up and laugh. A woman near me said, "Ooh, what set them off?" Nobody knew. Nobody cared, really. London's full of bangs and beeps. A bin lorry, a backfire, something falling off a scaffold. You don't think anything of it. But Daniel told me later that the birds were the first thing he noticed too, even from inside his nan's kitchen. He said it was like hearing a noise in your house when you're half asleep. Your body knows before you do. Something old and animal in him sat up. The kettle in his nan's kitchen went a bit quiet. The toast stopped smelling of toast. He didn't leave the kitchen yet, but he started, he said, to come back up the stairs of himself, slowly, just in case. Then there was the second thing, and the second thing I did clock because it didn't fit. A man came out of the park. Now people come out of the park all the time, obviously, but this man came out wrong. He came out fast, almost running but trying not to, that horrible stiff-legged half-run people do when they're frightened but don't want to admit it yet, when their brain is still arguing with their legs. He was middle-aged in a green wax jacket, and he had no coat done up and no umbrella in the rain, and his face, I'll never forget his face had gone the color of the pavement. Gray. Wet gray. He didn't look at the guards. He didn't look at the tourists. He looked at the road like he was trying to get across it before something caught him. And as he passed the woman next to me, he said something, not to her, just out loud, the way you do when a thing is too big to keep in your mouth. He said, there's something in the park, there's. And he didn't finish it, he just kept going. A few heads turned. A ripple. You know how a crowd is one animal, really, even when it pretends to be lots of separate people. The animal lifted its head. The laughing died down a notch. Phones came down an inch from faces. A man near the front said, "What did he say?" And someone else said, "Dunno." And the little girl who'd pressed her face to the railing looked up at her dad, because children read the weather of grown-ups faster than anyone. I looked at Daniel. And Daniel had changed. You wouldn't have seen it if you didn't know to look. He hadn't moved. He still hadn't moved a muscle, but the quality of his stillness was different. Before, it was the stillness of an empty house. Now it was the stillness of a cat that has heard a sound. The same shape, completely different inside. He was home. He'd come back into his body. I'm sure of it. He'd left the kitchen and climbed all the way back up the stairs of himself, and now he was standing behind his own eyes, looking out at a man in a green jacket disappearing down the road, and at a crowd starting, very slightly, to come apart at the edges, and at the dark green mouth of the park breathing across the road, and he was thinking. Well, I'll tell you what he was thinking because he told me. He was thinking, hold. That's all, one word, hold. Because that's the deal, you see. Not the deal with his body, the other deal, the bigger one. The one he made the day he passed out and stood on that parade ground and meant it. The deal that says, whatever happens, I hold this shape. People look at me to know if it's all right. While I stand here, it's all right. The second I run, it isn't. He didn't know yet what was happening. None of us did. There was just a man's gray face, and a road full of birds in the air, and a crowd holding its breath, and a fine rain coming down, and a young man in a red coat standing very, very still, deciding, in the quiet of his own skull, that he was not going to be the thing that told these people to be afraid. I think about that a lot, that he decided it before he knew, before he had any idea what was coming, while there was still a version of the morning where it was nothing, a false alarm, a bloke who'd had a turn. Even then, he chose his shape. Some people are brave when they have all the facts. That's easier than it sounds, but it's still the easier kind. Daniel was brave with no facts at all. He was brave in the gap, in the not knowing, in the 10 or 15 seconds where the only honest thing to feel was I don't understand and I'm scared and my body wants to leave. He stayed. And then across the road, somewhere deep in the green, the morning ended. I've tried to describe the sound 100 times and I always get it wrong. People expect it to be a bang. It wasn't a bang, not really. A bang is sharp and it's over. This was lower than that. It was a sound you felt in your chest before you heard it in your ears, a great soft thud that came up through the soles of your feet, through the wet pavement, like the whole road had been a drum and something enormous had hit it once from underneath. And then, a half-second later, the noise of it caught up. A deep, flat crack that rolled out across the park and bounced off the stone buildings and came back wrong. Then, for a moment, and this is the part people never believe, there was silence. A complete, ringing silence, as if the sound had used up all the other sounds. Then everything happened at once. The birds, which had only just started to settle, went up again, but this time there was nothing pretty about it. The crowd's held breath came out as a single noise, not a scream exactly, more a kind of low collective groan, the sound a room makes when the lights go out. Somewhere a car alarm started, then another. A woman said, "Oh God," very quietly, almost politely, the way English people do at the start of a disaster before the manners burn off. I turned to look at the park and I couldn't see anything at first. Just the trees. And then, above the trees, maybe 200 yards in, a column of pale smoke or dust climbing up into the gray sky, fattening as it went, and it was the wrongness of it that hit me, that there should be a clean gray column rising out of a place where people walk their dogs. I don't know how long I stood there. Time does a thing in those moments. It stretches and it skips. I have whole seconds I can't account for. What I remember next is the running. It started with a few people and then it was everyone. The crowd that had been one calm animal became 100 frightened ones, all at once, all in different directions, because that's the cruel thing about a crowd in a panic, nobody agrees which way is safe. Some people ran away from the park towards us, towards the corner. Some ran along the road. The young dad grabbed his little girl and her yellow welly came off and he didn't stop for it. He just scooped her up under one arm like a parcel and went. And her face over his shoulder was pure white astonishment. She hadn't even started crying yet. She was still deciding whether this was a game. There was shoving. There was a metal railing that went over with a clang, and a man went down with it, and someone trod on his hand, and he howled and got up and kept running. There was a pram, oh God. There was a pram for a second with no one obviously attached to it, and my whole heart stopped, and then a woman seized it and dragged it round and was gone. And in the middle of all of it, in the middle of this stampede of terrified people, and falling railings and car alarms and that obscene gray column climbing into the sky, there was a man in a red coat, standing absolutely still. He had not moved. I want you to picture it properly because it's the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen and I'm frightened of getting it wrong. Everything that could move was moving. The world had come off its hinges. And there, like a nail driven into the center of the chaos, like the one fixed point the whole scene was spinning around, was Daniel. Bearskin on, chin up, eyes forward, rifle held just so, rein on his shoulders. Not moving. Now here is what I have learned since, and I think it matters, so let me say it plainly. He wanted to run. Of course he wanted to run. He told me later, and his voice when he told me was not the flat soldier's voice. It was a younger voice, almost a boy's, he said. Everything in me wanted to go. Everything. You don't train that out. You can't. The body knows the building's on fire and it wants out and it doesn't care about your coat. He said the deal he'd made, the one with his body, the kitchen, his Nan, it broke. It just broke. There was no kitchen. There was no Nan. There was no leaving, no floating off, no stepping out for a bit. The bang had slammed him all the way down into himself, right into the meat and bone of him, and for the first time in years he was completely, horribly present, 100% in his own skin, on that pavement in the worst moment of his life so far, with no way out of his own head. And that, he said, is the part nobody understands about the not moving. Everyone thinks the hard bit is being a statue when it's boring. It isn't. The hard bit is being a statue when every cell you own is screaming at you to be anything else. So why didn't he run? I asked him that, straight out. I said, why on earth didn't you run? No one would have blamed you. No one on God's earth would have blamed a man for running from that. And he thought about it for a long time. And then he said something I've never forgotten. He said, because they were watching me, to know how scared to be. That's it, that's the whole thing. He'd realized in some lightning-fast place below thinking that he was the most visible person on that street. The tall man in the bright red coat who never moves. And he understood that the second he broke, the second he dropped his rifle and ran like the rest of us, he wouldn't just be saving himself. He'd be firing a starting pistol. He'd be telling 40 terrified people in the loudest possible way, yes, it's as bad as you fear. Run, Every man for himself, climb over the children if you have to. And if he just stood there impossibly, insanely calm, then maybe, some part of all those scrambling animal brains would catch sight of him out of the corner of an eye and think, without words, it can't be the end of the world. Look, he's still standing. He's not even moving. He was being a fixed point on purpose. He was turning his own paralyzed terror into a gift. He took the worst thing, the trained inability to move, the thing that should have made him a sitting duck, and he made it mean it's all right, I've got the line. You can be afraid, but you don't have to be lost. I didn't understand any of that at the time, naturally. At the time I just saw a guardsman not running, and some stupid animal part of me did exactly what he'd hoped. It saw him standing and it loosened just a notch, just enough. I stopped. I'd been about to run and I stopped, and I thought, clear as a bell in the middle of all that noise, if he's not running I don't have to either. And once I'd stopped I could think. And once I could think I could help. That's the thing about a fixed point. It doesn't just save itself. It gives everyone else their thinking back. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because the worst of it hadn't happened yet. The worst of it was the child. In all the running and all the scatter, a little boy had got separated. He was tiny, 3, maybe 4. Blue coat, one of those bobble hats with a face on it. And he'd been knocked or dropped or simply let go of in the crush. And now he was standing in the middle of the emptying pavement, exactly where the crowd had been, turning round and round, looking for a leg to hold that wasn't there. His mouth was open in that silent, square-shaped children make in the half-second before the scream comes. He was right in the path of it. People were still surging through. Big, panicked adults not looking down, and any one of them could have gone straight over him, could have knocked him under their own feet without ever knowing he was there. And he was 4 feet from Daniel's post. Now here is the moment. Here is the whole story, really, packed into about 2 seconds. A guardsman on ceremonial duty does not move. That is the entire identity of the thing. Daniel had just done the hardest thing of his life by not moving. He had held the line through a bomb. He was the fixed point. He was the one calm thing in the world, and 40 people were leaning on his stillness without knowing it. And there was a child about to be trampled at his feet. If he moved, he broke the spell. If he broke the spell, the crowd might tip back into full panic. If he didn't move, the child died. Maybe, probably, right there, while he watched. He told me the calculation didn't happen in words. There wasn't time for words. He said it was more like 2 pictures, the line breaking, and the boy going under, held up side by side for the smallest sliver of a second. And then his body simply chose, the way your hand chooses to catch a falling glass before you've decided anything. He moved. After all of it, after the bang, after the stampede, after holding the line through the unholdable. The thing that finally made Daniel Hartley move, on the worst morning of his life, was a 4-year-old in a bobble hat. But here's what got me. Here's the bit I'll carry to my grave. He didn't run. Even then, even breaking, he didn't lose the shape. He took 2 long, fast, controlled strides. I can see them now, the boots, the absolute precision of them even in chaos, and he didn't fling himself or dive or scramble. He scooped the boy up off the pavement with one arm, swept him up against the red coat, and turned his own body, his big, heavy, trained body, into a wall between the child and the surging crowd. He planted himself, feet apart, the boy clamped to his chest. The rifle still in his other hand, held out in a cross, not as a weapon, just as a barrier, an arm to part the river. And he stood there in the storm of people like a rock in a flood, and the people broke around him left and right, and not one of them touched that child. He was still a fixed point. He just made the fixed point mobile for 2 strides and then nailed it down again 4 feet over, with a boy in a bobble hat folded into it. The boy was screaming now, full scream, and Daniel and I only know this because I was close enough, because I'd stopped, because his stillness had given me my legs back. Daniel had lowered his head just slightly, the bearskin tipping forward, and he was saying something to the boy, down into the bobble hat, over and over. I couldn't hear the words over the alarms. but I could see his lips moving and I could see his jaw, that jaw that hadn't moved in 40 minutes for 100 laughing tourists, working away gently, saying something, the same something, again and again, to a terrified child. I asked him later what he'd said. He went a bit pink. He's a hard lad in a lot of ways and it embarrassed him. And then he told me. He said he didn't really know where it came from. He said he'd just heard himself saying it. He'd been saying, "You're all right, I've got you. We're not going anywhere. You're all right, I've got you. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere." The same thing his whole job said. The same thing his stillness said to 40 strangers. The same promise made small enough to fit in a child's ear. "We're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. While I'm here, it's all right." And the strangest thing, the thing I still can't fully explain, the boy believed him. The scream wound down, not all at once, but it wound down into hiccuping sobs, into shudders, and the little hands that had been beating at the air found 2 fistfuls of red wool and grabbed on, and held, and Daniel stood there in the emptying street with a child welded to his chest, and held the line and waited. He waited for the mother. He somehow knew, I think, that the worst thing he could do was move off looking for her, because if she came back to where she lost him and he wasn't there, so he stayed. Of course he stayed. Staying is the only thing that man knows how to do, and on that morning it turned out to be the bravest thing in the world. He waited. And around the 3 of us, me frozen, him planted, the boy clinging, the morning kept tearing itself apart. Sirens now, real ones, coming from everywhere that yelp and wail, folding over each other. People shouting. A man trying to direct traffic that had stopped anyway. Someone on the ground being helped by 2 strangers. And over the trees, that gray column thinning out at last, leaning in the wind, starting, very slowly, to come apart. The mother came back about a minute later, though I'd have sworn it was an hour. She came the way that man in the green jacket had gone, that stiff, wrong, half-running stride, except hers was worse, because she was running towards the danger, not away from it, which is the thing only a mother will do. Her coat was open. She'd lost a shoe somewhere and didn't know it. Her face was a face I hope I never see again. A face with nothing left on it but one single thing, and she was screaming a name into the chaos. And the name was lost in the sirens, and she couldn't see him. She couldn't see her boy, because her boy was a small blue shape folded into a tall red one, hidden against the coat. And then she saw the coat, and she stopped. And you could see her brain refuse it for a second, because what does that even mean? A guardsman holding your child, and then she saw the bobble hat, and the little hands gripping the red wool, and she made a sound I can't write down. She didn't run the last few steps. She sort of fell through them. And Daniel, he didn't hand the boy over straight away. People always think he just passed him across like a parcel. He didn't. He lowered himself. This big planted man went down, controlled, onto one knee on the wet pavement in the ceremonial coat, so that the boy was at her height, so she didn't have to reach up, so that the handover happened gently, child to mother, at the right level, the way you'd pass something precious and breakable. And the boy went from the red coat into her arms in one movement, like water poured from one cup to another, and she folded around him and went down onto the pavement herself, just sat down right there in the road with him, rocking, saying his name now in a completely different voice, a voice that had the bottom put back into it. And Daniel stood back up. He stood up and he stepped back 2 paces to the spot. His spot. The exact place he'd been posted. And he brought his heels together and he lifted his chin, and he set his eyes back on the building across the road, and he became, once again, a statue. I have never seen anything like it, and I don't expect to again. One second he was a man on his knees handing a child to its mother, the most human thing you could imagine. And the next he had folded all of that back up, all of it, the fear and the strain and the tenderness, folded it away somewhere inside and put the shape back on like a coat and stood his post. Because it wasn't over, that's the thing. For us it was nearly over, the worst of the running had passed, the police were arriving, there'd be cordons and questions and a long, strange day. But for Daniel, the job hadn't changed. He was a sentry. He'd been posted. No one had stood him down, and until someone with the right voice told him otherwise, he would stand exactly where he'd been put, because that, in the end, was the deal. The biggest deal of all. A police officer came over to him a moment later, a young one out of breath, and said something, and gestured down the road, asking him to move back, I think, behind a line they were setting up. And Daniel only on a clear instruction from someone whose instruction it was to give, moved. Marched. Smart, exact, underwater slow even now, back behind the new line, and took up a fresh post there and froze again. I watched him do it, and I thought my heart would come out of my chest. I don't remember much of the next hour with any order to it. I remember being moved back. I remember a foil blanket round someone's shoulders. I remember a man crying into his phone, saying, I'm fine, I'm telling you I'm fine, and clearly not being fine at all. I remember the strange, shamed quiet that comes over a crowd after a panic, when everyone's heart rate comes down and they start to feel embarrassed about the running, about the railing they knocked over, about the welly they didn't stop for. I remember the rain finally stopping, and a thin, watery bit of sun coming through, which felt almost rude. And I remember looking back once before they moved us all on properly at the line of guardsmen now standing further back behind the police tape, and finding the tall one, and he was perfect. Bearskin, chin, eyes front, as if nothing at all had happened, as if he hadn't, 20 minutes before, knelt in the road to hand a screaming child back to its mother. You'd never have known. You would absolutely never have known. And that, somehow, that was the thing that finally made me cry, standing on the pavement at Hyde Park Corner, a grown man with a cold coffee, crying at the back of a guardsman who would not move. It turned out in the end that fewer people were badly hurt than it first seemed. I'm not going to pretend it was nothing, because it wasn't nothing, and there were people whose mornings ended in hospital and a couple whose lives changed that day, and I won't be glib about them. But it could have been so much worse, and a lot of why it wasn't comes down to ordinary people doing one decent thing each in the middle of their fear. The woman who grabbed the abandoned pram, the two strangers who knelt by the man on the ground, all of it. People are better than the panic makes them look. I believe that more now than I did before. But the boy in the bobble hat was completely, perfectly fine, not a scratch. He'd have no memory of it at all probably in a year or two. It'll be a story his mum tells him when he's older, and he'll roll his eyes at it the way you do at the stories about when you were little. A soldier picked you up, love, a guardsman, in the big hat. He wouldn't let go of you, and the boy won't really understand. And maybe that's the best thing of all. Maybe the whole point of what Daniel did is that the boy gets to not understand. He gets to grow up not knowing how close it was, because a man he'll never remember decided not to run. I tracked Daniel down about 4 months later. It wasn't easy, and I won't bore you with how. He wasn't keen at first. They never are, the real ones. He kept saying it wasn't a big deal, he just did his job, anyone would have all of that. And I let him say it because I could see he needed to, and then I said no. No, Daniel, not anyone, I was there. I saw the people who ran. I was one of them. Anyone runs, you didn't. And that's when he went quiet, and that's when he started slowly to tell me the true version. About the kitchen. About his nan who died, it turned out, the winter before. That was why the kitchen, I think, though he never said so directly. That was where he went to be still, to a warm room with a woman in it who was gone everywhere else but there. About the deal with the body. About the bang slamming him home into his own skin. About the word hold. About the two pictures side by side. About what he whispered into the bobble hat. And near the end, I asked him the thing I'd been wanting to ask the whole time. I said, when you stand there, really stand there, the proper not moving, where do you actually go? Are you here or are you not? Is there anyone home? And he thought about it in that careful way. And then he said the thing that I think is the truest thing anyone has ever told me about being a person. He said, I used to think the trick was leaving, going off to the kitchen, you know, getting out of the body so it couldn't get at me. He turned his cup round on the table. But that morning taught me it's the other way. The leaving's just the practice. The real thing is the coming back. Anybody can leave. Cowards leave. The whole job, the whole point of standing there, it's so that when it matters, when the bang goes off and the kid's on the floor and everything in you wants to be gone, you can do the hard thing. He looked up. You can come back into your own body and stay in it, even though it hurts, even though you're frightened. You stand inside yourself and you hold. I've thought about that more than almost anything anyone's ever said to me. Because we all leave, don't we? All of us. We've all got a kitchen we slip off to when the world gets too loud. We check our phones, we pour a drink, we go somewhere in our heads, we leave the body holding the shape while the real us steps out for a bit. And mostly that's fine. Mostly the world lets us. But every so often the bang goes off. And the question, the only question that's ever really mattered, is whether you can come back. Whether, when it counts, you can climb all the way back up the stairs of yourself, into the frightened animal of your own body, and stand there and stay, and be the fixed point that somebody else is leaning on without even knowing it. Daniel could. Daniel did. A 23-year-old in a coat people make fun of, standing in the rain, came all the way home into himself on the worst morning of his life and held. I don't know where he is now. Out of the army, I think. We swapped messages for a while and then drifted the way you do. The boy's mother found him eventually too through the regiment, and there was a small thing in a local paper, a photo of her and the boy and Daniel looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and that was the only time his name was ever attached to it in public. He didn't want a medal. He genuinely didn't. He said the worst part of the whole business was the fuss. But I'll tell you what stays with me. It's not the bang. It's not even the boy, though God knows that's the bit that makes my throat go. It's the stillness, that impossible, chosen, unbearable stillness. A whole street coming apart, the sky full of smoke, every instinct in every body screaming *go, and one man choosing to stay inside himself on purpose, because he understood something the rest of us forgot in our fear. That sometimes the bravest thing a body can do is nothing at all, held perfectly, for as long as it takes, so that the people around it can remember how to breathe. We spend our whole lives trying to get out of our own heads. He spent his learning how to come back. And on a gray morning by the park, when the world fell off its hinges and the rest of us ran, that quiet, terrified, perfectly still young man in the red coat looked down at a child who needed him, came all the way home into his own frightened skin, and would not go anywhere at all.